Americans have to look at that and say, okay, what was this country really founded on, and for who?
Exactly.
You know?
And to see with everything that happens in secret, to see the fanfare, like they're preparing for this big visit from the Pope and all of this fanfare that's going forth as far as that's concerned. But what really gets underneath my skin, Stewart, is we see obvious glaring issues coming up in what our government has done in terms of where we're at in our economy, in terms of the gas prices completely out of control,
right,
and understanding all the other obvious issues, being lied to go into a war where we've lost 4,000 lives. And you mean to tell me that no one has, I mean, it's almost to the point where it's frightening, where we see everything that's going on around us, but we see particularly the religious community just letting it happen.
Well, you know, all the wars, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, they're all contrived. There was no reason to go into them at all, except to control a large section of the earth, the utilities, the resources, etc. And the war in Iraq is just one of the beginning. We're going to see Iran soon attacked as well, and Pakistan will be, and it will go right across Asia into Southeast Asia. You know, I work a lot in Singapore and Malaysia and these areas, and I'll tell you, these people know what's coming. They expect it. There's no doubt in their minds that the Americans will eventually wipe right across Asia, right over to Singapore.
Now, we understand where our government is. We understand where religion has played a role in that, in terms of everything that we discuss. There is also an element, a component, and I've said this before, right on this very, very show, because I've questioned, like, for example, you see in Revelations where it talks about Christ is going to come back and take and subdue the planet. But when Christ talks in the Gospels, he talks about, I go to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you may be also. But in Revelations, we see a different story. I begin to wonder what really is going to happen. And you mentioned something, and you have information in terms of a stage invasion. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's already in process, actually. I'll give you the whole scenario, and that is that they will create a staged alien invasion using Blue Beam Project, where they will actually project ships, etc., in the sky. These things are so well technologically created that they even pick up on radar. They even have sound effects. I mean, people will be scared out of their minds. And then they will have an alien savior race come to dispel these attackers, and of course that will be the reptilians, who will then be promoted or shown as a savior race, and that they are actually our ancestors, and that what's in them is in us. And then they will have a staged second coming of Christ, where he will proclaim the New World Order as his new holy empire. And when they take his DNA to prove who he is, it will identically match with the DNA they will take from the blood on the Shroud of Turin, which, over the years, has gone back and forth. They announced a few years ago that the Shroud of Turin was a hoax or a fake. And then the church in Turin burned down, and the shroud vanished mysteriously. And then, all of a sudden, Israeli scientists had a piece of it and said they had tested it and found pollen samples in it that could have only come from ancient Israel 2,000 years ago, thereby re-verifying the Shroud of Turin.
Right.
And so they used and cloned the blood from that to create a body that they will present as the real Christ.
Is it true with the Shroud of Turin shed? Is Christ alive? Did he resurrect and perhaps eventually die?
Well,
or is he still is eternally alive?
Well, that story, in the Bible is contrived. The person in the Bible, the real name was Emmanuel, and that person was genetically created by an alien race in order to skewer belief of mankind a certain way. The crucifixion was staged. The body was taken. It was drugged, taken off the cross, and it was sent to Srinagar, or Central Asia, in what is now Kashmir. And to this day, you can see a grave in Kashmir with Yeshua, the name on it, that he lived to be 117. And in fact, his grandson showed up in Japan several centuries after. There's documentation in Japan that this guy named Yeshua showed up, who was the grandson of the original one. Wow. Japan, and there's an entire shrine to him there. So the story is quite interesting. Now, Mary Magdalene did have 3 children with him, and she and 2 of them went to the south of France when she could not get along with Peter, and he might have killed her. So she took 2 of the children and went to south of France. To this very day, there are villages in the south of France who recreate her arrival. And there's a whole history in the south of France of an ancient Hebrew kingdom, which of course is taught in European history, but not taught in American history. In fact, we are going in June on a tour to this area. We're taking groups of people, and you can look on my website, expansions.com, and we're going to explore this and investigate it, and we're going to have a very important speaker who is an expert on this tell us the information.
Right. Well, hopefully maybe we can get you back where you can share that with us here on the Investigators Report, because I know it will definitely be some very vital and very, very important information. Well, Stewart, we have about 3 minutes left, and with that time remaining, we can talk about your work in mind control, which I think is very, very important because, as I stated earlier, it would seem that with all that's going on, it seems like the American public is in a somewhat of a trance, not responding to this, not writing and calling their government, and not really doing what is necessary to counteract this. So there appears to be some type of mind control taking place. You do also work in color therapy, which is very, very, I've been in the process of reading your book on brown color therapy, which is outstanding. I mean, it works. Bottom line, it really, really works. And then there's God-mind thinking, which, down the road, we're looking to bring Janet on board to do a show to discuss that particular aspect of what you do. Give us in a nutshell your work. Tell us how the listeners can contact you so that we can wrap it up from there.
Well, bottom lining it is, I do right now, I teach language of hyperspace, which is color, tone, and archetype symbol, which is how your mind really thinks, and you can arrange those symbols in a formula to create whatever you want to manifest on the earth. I teach how to open up that 97% of the DNA, which is called junk DNA, which is the real functions of all creation.
Right.
And I also teach deprogramming, because unfortunately we live on a planet where every single person has programming to one degree or another, which affects the choices that we make in our lives and how we live our lives, and makes us into a victim. And I teach people how to undo that and reclaim your mind and your body and your spirituality and create a life that you want for yourself without manipulation and control from outside sources.
And they can find that at your website at expansions.com?
Correct. Expansions.com. I have updated news every day. I have Q&As. All my products are up there. My seminar listing of where I'll be. It's very comprehensive. I invite everybody to go on, look at expansions.com and see what you think for yourself.
And with that said, Stewart, I would imagine that this really is the vital component that we're going to need in order to counteract what's going on. Is that correct?
Well, if we don't take control of our own minds and our own bodies, somebody else will, and they are doing that.
That is exactly what they intend to do. Constant control. I remember in one interview where you did mention that the reptilians are used to mind control. They believe that's the only way to exist.
That's their way of life because it keeps their culture undeviated through eternity.
Unbelievable. But for us, it behooves us, if we want to maintain freedom, if we really want to understand our ability and our power in the mix of things, let us pay close attention to what we just discussed in the past hour. Stewart, we thank you for being with us here on the Investigators Report. Folks, we thank you for joining us and urge you for our next program. But until that time, may the God of the universe bless you. We'll see you next week. You've been listening to the Investigators Report, which is a regular feature of this station and is produced by Garinger Research and Investigations. For more information on this program and for upcoming programs, and to even listen to past programs in our archives, be sure to log on to our blog page at theinvestigatorsreport.blogspot.com. That address again is theinvestigatorsreport.blogspot.com. Well, we trust you enjoyed this informative and provocative program, and we urge you to join us next time for our next session of the Investigators Report right here on the Community Listening Network.